If you're a green card holder, visa holder, or any non-citizen living in the United States, what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes could completely change how you see your future in America. And I'm not being dramatic here. There's a bill right now sitting in the Senate that has immigration attorneys losing sleep, advocacy groups sounding alarms, and millions of immigrant families holding their breath. This isn't fear-mongering. This is about being informed and prepared. By the time you finish watching this video, you'll know exactly what House Resolution 875 is, where it stands today, what could happen as early as January 2026, and most importantly, the exact steps you need to take right now to protect yourself and your family. Welcome to Dream Visa Updates. I'm John, and before we dive in, I need to make something absolutely clear. The information I'm sharing with you today is based on a bill that has already passed the House of Representatives, but it's not law yet. It still needs to pass the Senate and be signed by the President. However, and this is crucial, given the momentum this bill has and the political climate we're living in right now, every single non-citizen needs to understand what's being proposed and what it could mean for their life in America. So let's talk about H.R. 875. The official name is the Jeremy and Angel C. and Sergeant Brandon Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act of 2025. Representative Barry Moore from Alabama introduced this bill, and here's what should get your attention. It passed the House on June 26, 2025 with a vote of 246 to 160. That's not a close call. That's a significant majority with bipartisan support from both Republican and Democratic representatives. Right now, as I'm recording this, the bill is sitting with the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as we're heading into January 2026, many experts are saying we could see real movement on this legislation. Here's what this bill actually does. At its core, H.R. 875 aims to change the Immigration and Nationality Act to make driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs a ground for both inadmissibility and deportability for non-citizens. Now, if you're not familiar with immigration law terms, let me break this down in plain English because this is critical. Inadmissibility means you can be denied entry into the United States. And this doesn't just apply to people trying to come here for the first time. This applies to lawful permanent residents, green card holders who travel abroad and then try to come back home. If you're deemed inadmissible, you can be stopped at the border and denied re-entry, even though you have a valid green card in your hand. Deportability means that even if you're already living here in the United States, you can be removed from the country and sent back to wherever you came from. Now, here's what makes this bill absolutely earth-shattering. Under the current law right now, a single misdemeanor DUI is generally not enough to get someone deported or denied entry. Immigration authorities typically look for aggravating factors. Things like multiple DUI convictions, driving without a license, causing serious injury to someone, or other circumstances that make the offense more severe. But H.R. 875 would throw all of that out the window. If this bill becomes law, any non-citizen who has been convicted of a DUI, or here's the scary part, who even admits to committing the essential elements of a DUI offense, could face immediate deportation proceedings or be barred from entering the United States. This includes people who simply admit to driving under the influence, even if they were never formally convicted in court. Think about that for a second. The bill specifically states, and I want you to hear this clearly, that these provisions would apply without regard to how the underlying jurisdiction classifies the offense. What does that actually mean? It means it doesn't matter if your state treats a DUI as a misdemeanor, a traffic violation, or something else entirely. It doesn't matter if you completed a diversion program, paid all your fines, or had the charge reduced to something minor. Under federal immigration law, as H.R. 875 would amend it, any DUI would be treated the exact same way as a deportable offense. Period. So who does this bill impact? All non-citizens. And that's a very, very broad category. This includes green card holders, lawful permanent residents, even those who have lived in the United States for decades. It includes people on temporary work visas like H-1B, L-1, or TN visas. It affects international students on F-1 visas, people on tourist or visitor visas, DACA recipients, asylum seekers and refugees. Anyone who is not a United States citizen falls under this. Now, here's one of the most terrifying aspects of this bill. It doesn't include any temporal limitations. Let me explain what that means. Even if you had a DUI conviction 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it could still be used as grounds for deportation or inadmissibility if H.R. 875 becomes law. Immigration law often allows for retroactive application of new regulations. What that means in real terms is that people who were not considered deportable yesterday could suddenly find themselves in deportation proceedings tomorrow. The bill also doesn't provide for any discretionary waivers. The language is absolute, black and white. If you have a DUI conviction or admission, you are deportable. No exceptions, no second chances, no consideration of your circumstances. Let me tell you where this bill stands right now. After passing the House on June 26, 2025, H.R. 875 was sent to the Senate on June 27, 2025. It was read twice and referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. As of today, the bill is still sitting in that committee. Now, for a bill to actually become law, it must pass both the House and the Senate in identical form and then be signed by the President. The Senate Judiciary Committee is responsible for reviewing the bill, potentially holding hearings, and deciding whether to report it to the full Senate for a vote. Historically, and this might give you some hope, many bills die in committee and never make it to a full Senate vote. However, several factors suggest that H.R. 875 could be different, could be the exception. First, the White House has publicly endorsed this bill. According to official statements, the administration supports H.R. 875 as a measure to enhance public safety and hold non-citizens to a strict standard when it comes to dangerous driving. This executive support adds massive political momentum to the bill's prospects. Second, remember that vote I mentioned? The bill received substantial bipartisan support in the House. While it was introduced by a Republican and had mostly Republican co-sponsors, that final vote of 246 to 160 tells us that some Democrats also voted in favor. This bipartisan backing could make it much easier for the bill to advance in the Senate. Third, immigration enforcement has been a major priority for the current administration, and H.R. 875 fits perfectly within this broader policy agenda. Here's my prediction for January 2026. And I want you to pay close attention to this. I believe there's a moderate to high likelihood that the Senate Judiciary Committee will take action on this bill in the coming weeks. January is typically a very busy time for Congress, especially with a new session beginning. Committee chairs often use the early months of the year to move priority legislation. Given the White House support and the public safety framing of this bill, I would not be surprised at all to see hearings scheduled in January or February 2026. However, predicting Senate action is always tricky because individual senators have more power to slow down or block legislation through procedural means. Some legal experts and immigration attorneys believe that if the Senate is going to pass H.R. 875, it might be attached to a larger piece of legislation rather than being voted on as a standalone bill. This is actually a very common legislative tactic. For example, if there's a must-pass spending bill or a broader immigration reform package, H.R. 875 could be tucked in as one component. This would make it much harder for opponents to block it and could dramatically speed up its passage. If the bill does pass the Senate and get signed into law, it would take effect immediately upon enactment. The moment the president puts his signature on that bill, it becomes law, and immigration authorities could begin applying it right away. There's no grace period, no transition time. Let me walk you through some real-world scenarios to help you understand just how serious the implications are. Imagine Maria. She came to the United States from Mexico in 1995. She became a lawful permanent resident in 2000. She's married to a U.S. citizen. She has 3 children who were born here in America. She owns a home. She works as a nurse. In 2010, Maria made a mistake. She went to a friend's birthday party, had 2 glasses of wine, and decided to drive home. She was pulled over at a DUI checkpoint and arrested. She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor DUI, paid her fines, completed an alcohol education program, and never had any other legal problems. For the past 15 years, Maria has lived her life without any immigration concerns related to that DUI. She's renewed her green card twice without any issues. She's traveled internationally without problems. Under current immigration law, her single misdemeanor DUI from 15 years ago is not a significant immigration issue. But if H.R. 875 becomes law, everything changes for Maria. If she travels outside the United States to visit family and tries to return, she could be stopped at the border and deemed inadmissible because of that 2010 DUI conviction. Even without traveling, she could receive a notice to appear in immigration court where the government would seek to deport her based on that same conviction from 15 years ago. Her entire life, everything she's built, could be destroyed because of one mistake from over a decade ago. Consider Raj. He's in the United States on an H-1B work visa. He's a software engineer at a tech company and has been here for 3 years. His employer has started the green card sponsorship process for him. His American dream is unfolding. Last year, Raj was at a company happy hour. He had a beer, thought he was fine to drive, but was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. The officer suspected DUI and asked Raj to perform field sobriety tests. Raj didn't perform well on the tests, though his blood alcohol content was just barely over the legal limit. He was arrested and charged with DUI. His attorney was able to negotiate a plea deal where Raj entered a diversion program. If he successfully completes the program, the charge will be dismissed and won't appear as a conviction on his record. Under current immigration law, Raj would likely still be okay. His green card process could continue. But under H.R. 875, the situation becomes completely different. Remember, the bill applies not just to convictions, but also to admissions of the essential elements of the offense. During his arrest, if Raj acknowledged to the police officer that he had consumed alcohol before driving, or if he made any statements that could be interpreted as an admission, he could face inadmissibility or deportability issues even though he's never formally convicted. His career in America, his future, everything could vanish. Think about Carlos. He was brought to the United States by his parents when he was 5 years old. He's now 28. He has DACA status and works as a teacher. Carlos has lived virtually his entire life in the United States. He knows no other home. Last month, Carlos was driving home from a friend's house after watching a football game. He had 2 beers over the course of 4 hours, and he genuinely believed he was sober enough to drive. Unfortunately, he was pulled over for having a broken taillight, and the officer smelled alcohol on his breath. Carlos was arrested for DUI. Under current regulations, a DUI could potentially affect Carlos's DACA renewal, but the determination would be made on a case-by-case basis. There would be discretion involved. But if H.R. 875 becomes law, Carlos would almost certainly lose any chance of regularizing his immigration status. The bill would make him inadmissible, which means he couldn't adjust his status, even if Congress were to pass legislation creating a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. The country he's called home his entire life could be taken away from him. Now, it's important to understand that H.R. 875 is controversial, and there are strong arguments on both sides of this debate. Supporters of this bill, including many members of Congress and the current administration, frame it as a common-sense public safety measure. They argue that driving under the influence is an incredibly dangerous behavior that puts innocent lives at risk. The bill is named after real victims, Jeremy, Angel C., and Sergeant Brandon Mendoza, who were all killed by drunk drivers. Supporters argue that the United States has every right to set high standards for non-citizens who want to live here, and that protecting American lives should be the top priority. They contend that if someone makes the choice to drive under the influence, they're demonstrating a disregard for the safety and well-being of others. Opponents of the bill, and this includes immigration attorneys, civil rights organizations, and advocacy groups, have raised serious concerns about its fairness and proportionality. First, they argue that the bill treats a misdemeanor offense as if it were equivalent to serious violent crimes. In the criminal justice system, DUIs are typically treated as relatively minor offenses, especially for first-time offenders. Opponents say that deporting someone and separating them from their family for a single misdemeanor DUI is a punishment that far exceeds the crime. Second, critics point out that the bill offers zero room for discretion or consideration of individual circumstances. Under H.R. 875, there's no way for an immigration judge to consider factors like how long ago the DUI occurred, whether the person has been rehabilitated, whether they have U.S. citizen family members who would suffer if they're deported, or whether deportation would cause extreme hardship. The system becomes completely rigid. Third, opponents are deeply concerned about retroactive application. The idea that someone could be deported for something they did 20 or 30 years ago, which wasn't a deportable offense at the time, strikes many as fundamentally unfair. It violates basic principles of justice. Fourth, there are serious concerns about racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement. Studies have shown that in some jurisdictions, drivers from certain communities are disproportionately stopped by police. There's a real worry that H.R. 875 could make this problem worse, giving law enforcement a powerful tool to target immigrant communities specifically. Fifth, some legal experts have raised constitutional concerns about the lack of any waiver provision or judicial discretion. The absolute nature of the bill could face legal challenges. Finally, opponents argue that H.R. 875 doesn't actually make anyone safer. Research has consistently shown that immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans. Deporting people for a single DUI doesn't address the root causes of drunk driving and doesn't make communities safer. So, what should you do if you're a non-citizen living in the United States? First and foremost, do not dismiss H.R. 875 as just political theater or noise. This is a real bill with real momentum behind it. Even if you think it's unlikely to pass, the responsible thing to do, the smart thing to do, is prepare for the possibility that it could become law. Second, if you're a non-citizen, you absolutely cannot afford to drive after consuming any alcohol or using any drugs that could impair your ability to drive safely. And I mean any amount, even if you think you're under the legal limit, even if you feel completely fine. The risk is simply too great now. The stakes have completely changed. What might have been a minor legal issue in the past, something you could handle with a fine and some classes, could now potentially cost you everything: your home, your family, your entire life in America. If you're going to drink, you must arrange for alternative transportation. Use a rideshare service like Uber or Lyft. Designate a sober driver before you go out. Take public transportation or just stay where you are. Sleep on your friend's couch. These are small inconveniences compared to losing everything. If you have any DUI in your past, and I mean any, whether it's a conviction, a charge that was dismissed, or even just an arrest where nothing came of it, you need to consult with an experienced immigration attorney as soon as possible. Don't wait until H.R. 875 becomes law. Don't wait until you're sitting in immigration court. An attorney can review your specific situation, look at the details of your case, and advise you on what steps you should take right now to protect yourself. Immigration law is incredibly complex, and every single case is different. An attorney can help you understand your options and develop a real strategy. If you're a green card holder and you're eligible to apply for citizenship, listen to me carefully. This is the time to do it, right now. U.S. citizens cannot be deported for DUI or any other criminal offense except in extremely rare cases involving fraud in obtaining citizenship. Citizenship is the ultimate protection, the shield that can't be taken away. To be eligible for naturalization, you generally need to have been a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years, or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. You need to meet certain physical presence requirements. You need to demonstrate good moral character and pass English and civics tests. Under current law, having a DUI can affect your ability to establish good moral character for citizenship purposes, but it's not an automatic bar. However, if H.R. 875 passes, it could make it much harder to demonstrate good moral character with a DUI on your record. So if you've been thinking about applying for citizenship, if you've been putting it off, don't wait any longer. Start the process now. If you're a non-citizen with any DUI history, you should be extremely cautious about traveling outside the United States, especially once HR 875 gets closer to potentially becoming law. Remember, the bill makes DUI a ground for inadmissibility, which means you could be denied re-entry when you try to come back, even if you have a valid green card or visa in your hand. Even if America is your home. If you travel and then HR 875 becomes law while you're abroad, you could be stopped at the border when you return and told you can't come back. If you absolutely must travel for an emergency, consult with an immigration attorney beforehand to understand the risks you're taking. If you're ever stopped by police or approached by immigration officers, it's crucial that you understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. However, HR 875 specifically mentions admissions of DUI conduct. This means that if you tell an officer you had a couple of drinks, or if you make similar statements, those admissions could potentially be used against you in immigration proceedings. Be respectful and cooperative with law enforcement. Absolutely. But be very careful about what you say. If you're arrested, immediately ask for an attorney and don't make any statements without legal representation present. If you have a DUI in your past, gather all the documentation you can find about it right now. Don't wait. This includes court records, police reports, plea agreements, completion certificates from any programs you attended, letters of recommendation, evidence of rehabilitation, and anything else that shows what happened and what you've done since then. Having this documentation organized and ready could be crucial. Immigration law can change quickly, and HR 875 is proof of that. Make sure you're staying informed about the status of this bill and other immigration legislation that could affect you. Follow reliable sources of information. Be very wary of misinformation on social media because there's a lot of it out there. Subscribe to Dream Visa Updates, where I'll continue to bring you accurate, timely information about immigration law developments as they happen. I'm committed to keeping you informed. If you're in a situation where HR 875 could seriously affect you, it's wise to have a plan. I know this sounds scary, but you need to talk with your family about what would happen if you were detained or deported. Make sure important documents are organized and accessible. Consider giving a trusted family member or friend power of attorney so they can handle your affairs if you're unable to. If you have children, especially U.S. citizen children, make sure there's a plan for their care. This might sound extreme, I understand that, but for many families watching this video, these are real and necessary preparations. To wrap everything up, HR 875 is a bill that passed the House of Representatives in June 2025 and is currently pending in the Senate Judiciary Committee. If it becomes law, it would make any DUI conviction or admission a ground for deportation and inadmissibility for all non-citizens, including green card holders who have lived here for decades. The bill has significant political momentum with White House support and bipartisan backing in the House. As we move into January 2026, there's a very real possibility that the Senate could take action on this bill. The implications are profound and far-reaching. It would affect millions of non-citizens, including people who have lived in the United States for decades, whose only mistake was a single DUI, perhaps many, many years ago. If you're a non-citizen, the message is crystal clear. Protect yourself. Never, ever drink and drive. Not even a little bit. Not even if you think you're fine. Consult with an immigration attorney if you have any DUI history whatsoever. Consider applying for citizenship if you're eligible. Don't put it off. Be cautious about travel. Stay informed about what's happening with this legislation, and have a plan in place for your family. This is a challenging time for immigrant communities across America, but knowledge is power. By understanding what HR 875 is, what it could mean for your life, and what steps you can take right now, you're putting yourself in the best possible position to navigate whatever comes next. You're taking control of the situation instead of letting the situation control you. Remember, the information in this video is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice. Every immigration case is unique, and you should always consult with a qualified immigration attorney about your specific situation. Don't try to handle this alone. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Dream Visa Updates. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any important updates because things can change fast. Share this video with anyone in your community who might need this information. Your neighbor, your coworker, your family member. This could literally change someone's life. I'll be monitoring the status of HR 875 closely, and as soon as there are any significant developments, any movement in the Senate, any hearings scheduled, any votes taken, I'll create an update video immediately to keep you in the loop. Stay safe, stay informed, and take care of yourselves and your families. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.